Welcome to the Man Up God's Way podcast, a show that dives into the real, raw, and relevant issues for men in their faith, life, and community. Now, your host, Jody Burkeen.
Hey guys, Jody Burkeen here with the Man Up God's Way podcast. I want to thank you guys for joining us. If you get an opportunity, please share this podcast with your friends, your social media platform. Help us reach more and more people for the sake of the gospel. And we look forward to seeing your comments as well. Any clips or any of the podcasts that you see, please give us a comment, how you like it, what you don't like, and anything else in between. And so you can check us out on Spotify as well as Apple iTunes. You can also check us out on our website, manupgodsway.org. And thank you so much, guys. I'm really excited about our guest tonight. We've got a really good one, and I think he's going to have a story that will engage you and get you excited about what he has to say. And Frank Sell, glad to have you on the podcast today.
Man, Jody, it's my pleasure. It's still hard to even to understand that people just want to hear our story. So it's really cool the path that God's let me down.
Amen. I love it. I love it. So, one of the things that our audience always likes to hear is just kind of your background, your story. You can start at childhood or wherever that story starts you. I always call it kind of the Paul side, the Paul Saul side of your story. You know, you've got the Saul side, which is all the crazy things that got you to where you are. And then you got the Paul side finally when you got things right, you met Jesus and kind of went from there. And won't you share your story, and then we'll get into some of the businesses that you've had and just kind of the way that has grown you and moved you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I may not have been persecuting Christians and stuff like Saul, but I was definitely hard-headed and maybe a little bit of anger. I'm sure a lot of men can relate to that out there.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I'm 50 years old. I'm Frank Sell the fourth. My dad's the third. My son is the fifth. So when you think about legacy, there's thinking about it, and then there's living it, and that's so there's a standard uphold of who Frank Sell is, and that's one thing I've realized in life, and that's kind of what guides my path a lot. And so
Praise
it was
God.
March of 2013 was my literal come to Jesus moment. Up to that point, I started my first business at the age of 27 in 2003. Started a family in 2003, and so my partner and I, we had two kids, had a son and a daughter, Frank the fifth, and my daughter Madison. Great kids, love their work ethic, love their spirit. That relationship ended, and then I had a little better description of what I would like to see in my life, but not a full description because I didn't really have a guidepost, a cornerstone, or guiding light. Just used my best judgment, and that relationship was, man, it was tumultuous. It was everything that I needed to get me where I am today. So why I say that is because I feel like I call it the four levels of knowing stuff. Like, you don't know what you don't know. Then you know what you don't know. You become aware of some things in your life. Then you have the opportunity to decide, am I going to accept this or am I going to change this? So then you move into, I know what I know. It's kind of like a toddler when they first start walking. They're kind of wobbly, but they can walk. And then eventually you get into, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you know because you know it's so damn good. And that's because you've trained yourself and you intentionally put yourself either in situations or read books to grow yourself. And so for me, that was March of 2013 was my literal come to Jesus moment. So we had a lot of turmoil, and it wasn't just like situations that I didn't like. In we'll say divorce. I wasn't married to my children's mother, but we were separated, and then I did get married, and so I had two battlefronts in the family side. So
Right.
my children's mother, their lifestyle over there was, I knew it wasn't good, it wasn't great, and then my wife is one of those deals where kind of the savior type thing where I thought I could save her. I defined things a little better than I did the first time because I've become aware as I didn't know what I didn't know, and so moving into this relationship, I thought I had done a better job at that. But then there's also the Jezebel spirit is out there. Um,
Amen.
and so nowadays we call it narcissism. Uh, at the time I didn't know what a covert narcissist was or an overt narcissist. I didn't understand the mind manipulation and stuff that goes along with that.
Right.
So we had just a lot of friction between uh, a custody situation and a situation where I felt like my children were in an unsafe environment, and so I had to, as a man we live in Kansas, so it's a very very mother centered custody type stuff, and so I really had an uphill battle to really keep my children safe. I felt. Um, and so at the same time, I was also trying to do a marriage, not
Right.
just have a marriage, but do a marriage. Intentionally create the man, the husband, the king that I wanted to be, and so on. So it was March of 2013, just before my birthday. Would have been, gosh, I hate doing math in my head. Like my 38th birthday or something like that,
Okay.
37th birthday. And so it was at that time where what I was telling myself was that I'd had enough. And at the
Mm.
time, I don't know if you've ever heard of the men's encounter.
Mhm.
It's kind of centered around Galatians 5:1. It's for freedom you've been set free. Therefore, do not let yourself be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. That was really going through my town, and all my buddies were high on the weekend and wanting me to go to this thing. Man, you need to come to this. It's so good. And eventually, they we've all heard the saying that your ego is not your amigo, but I think it's my homie. Um, because the ego is just a gift to help push us and guide us and teach us. There's some bumps and bruises along the way, but
Right.
the ego also puts you in situations that's meant to iron sharpen iron. Put you in situations that you have the choice to either grow through it or just go through it. And so, really at that time, um, there was a few expletives, but it was, what the heck? I'm going to go to this thing because my ex was really pushing me to go to it. We had talked about it, and my mentality was, well, I'm going to this thing just to get away from you. I
Right.
need peace and quiet in
Mhm.
my life. Um, and that's one thing. Like I'm married now, remarried. Met my soulmate, just a beautiful woman inside and out. And when we decided that that was going to be our relationship, that was the conversation that
Mm.
she can have all of me except one thing. And she kind of looked at me funny, but I explained to her that one thing is my peace.
Mhm.
You ever mess with my peace, you ever intentionally, because I had experienced that through the Jezebel spirit and through narcissism, through my ex, the intentionality of doing things to create chaos and create problems. Um, so if that was the one standard that's it's a no go. And
Right.
so I thought, man, I'm gonna go this weekend and to get some peace. And so we obviously know, God's ways are above our ways. And here I am, my ego's telling me I'm going this weekend to get some peace, eat some Nutter Butters, and some ho hos, and drink some coffee and just get away.
Right.
So what's crazy is how God whispers, and sometimes how the devil shouts at us.
Mm.
So the story, the way the whole weekend started. Um, so I'm self-employed and I have a business. I have a repair shop, um, and things were just so tumultuous that I told her, you know what, I'm just going to drive there myself. I can't be here. I'm going to drive there myself. I'll see you on Sunday. This was a Friday. Um, we drop off on Friday, get picked up on Sunday. So I'm gonna drive there myself. But she was really adamant about wanting to drive me there. And so I parked my truck in my shop. And she came and met me there, and it just started the whole blame game, and I call it the blame thrower. Um, and I had it, and I was like, you know what? To heck with you. I'm going by myself. Like I said, this is exactly why I want to go by myself. So I go to back my truck out of the shop and smash the mirror on the door. Uh, and I just started laughing because I knew exactly what was happening. The devil was trying to dissuade me
Right.
from going to this weekend. I could have gotten angry about it and said, this is a sign to not go. But I knew just instinctually, I knew that the tricks, that this was something that the devil was trying to trip me up on for getting to that weekend. And man, it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And on Sunday, I think they had to call the hazmat team in to dry up all of my tears, because I finally, began to get an understanding or realize I didn't have to carry this burden by myself. And that's when I accepted
Right.
Christ in my life. And then from there, it was, I hadn't read my Bible much, up to that point. But I just instinctually knew that, okay, I made this decision. Now I need to kind of armor up. I need to find my circle. I need to find mentors. And I thought, man, there's this old family friends of my dad. My dad worked for this family like in the 70s. And their whole family, they modeled what I wanted my life, my family to be like. The cousins, uncles, families, sisters, brothers, everybody, they vacationed together, barbecued. They had a really great family unit. They were all successful monetarily. And so there's just a lot of things that I wanted to model from what they had built their lives. And so I reached out to them, and it's just amazing how God works, because I called them and they said, Frank, it's amazing that you called. Number one, God bless it that you've accepted Christ in your life. Um, but at the time they were doing a network marketing model, but it was all around faith and finance. I think it was called Life Leadership.
Right.
Um, and it was all around faith and finances and family and fitness and all this kind of different stuff. And it was exactly what I needed. And so what was really cool is that just the alignment with all that, because science will say this, that in nature, nothing can exist in a vacuum, kind of like the pouring new wine into old wineskins. And same thing, a vacuum, the Bible says the same thing, that when you decide to kick the devil out, he's going to come back with 7 of his buddies to try and get that same spot back.
Right.
So you better be intentional and equip yourself and fill that void with what your intentions are, and grow in that direction. So that's kind of my start, my journey to faith. And
Mm.
then it's still been a pretty wild ride up to this point.
Well, that's great, man. That is great. What a great story. Because I meant we all go through it. Whatever that is for you. Sometimes it's drugs, alcohol. Sometimes it's sex. Sometimes it's divorce. Sometimes it's failure in business. Losing everything kind of deal. We all kind of go through it, and sometimes God uses those trials and tribulations, one, to get our attention, like, okay, you still going to try this on your own and not need my help, or you're going to finally call on me. And then when you do, he'll sometimes still use those things to say, you still need me, you're going to be up here someday, but you still need me to get through these situations that while you're still there. And I love how, your understanding of trying to figure out marriage while going through a divorce, and not even a good thing, not exes and stepkids and all of that kind of stuff is always a trial and a tribulation. So that was what God was using you there
Yeah.
for. Wow. So how long have you been
Oh
married
yeah.
now?
And I didn't um coming up on 3 years. We've been
Okay.
together for 5 years. And that's an amazing story in itself. So when my ex and I, when we got divorced, uh, whatever it was, 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, I really felt like it was in my opinion, I felt like it was the Holy Spirit telling me, Frank, you've done everything that you said you would do, and you have tried. Um, it's time for you to step out of the way and let God just handle this. And like I said, it goes back to the Jezebel and the Jezebel spirit and narcissism. And once I started seeing that story of Jezebel come up in my life, or just whether it was sermons or whatever it was, um, it just I could really relate to what was going on there, what was going on in my life. And so I was single for probably about a year and a half. So what happened is at the time I lived on about 40 acres. I had a nice home, a pond, and all the material stuff in life that people would treasure. But I didn't have peace. And
Mm,
so my main business that I've done for 23 years is I fix hail damage on cars, the paintless dent repair, and you're familiar with that in St.
right.
Louis.
Oh yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I've done that for 23 years, and at that time, my son was 14, my daughter was 15, um, and I had full 100% custody of them at the time because I'd fought I'd fought to get full custody because the kids were, like I said, just in from everything I knew in a dangerous situation, and so my son was working with me at the shop, and it just finally became apparent, that what I'm being told of who I am and what I'm being told of these situations, because that Jezebel spirit just really wants to take away your foundation and really make
Mhm.
you question yourself and all these things. Um, I just decided, my dad works with us there in the same shop, and one day I decided, just I sent my son home with my dad. He stayed at grandpa's for the night. I drove home and packed up one bag of clothes and just things were at the edge anyways, and I just went home, grabbed one bag of clothes. I didn't care about any of the material stuff. I cared about my peace and keeping my kids safe, and so did that. Huge confrontation. My daughter, she was under the I guess you would call it the spell, or under the pressure of my ex, because she had in her mind and through emotionally manipulated her that I was the bad guy, she was right. I was doing all these things, but that's what the Jezebel does. She really just subverts and deny and defend and all these things we hear about.
Right.
And so at the time, my daughter stayed with her for a little while until basically the divorce was final, and she realized that financially and so on, I wasn't going to support her. And so when that happened, that ended, and both my kids came to live with me. I went from a 40-acre house on 40 acres to a two-bedroom house, and I slept in the basement on a mattress. I was I was happy, man. We were just we had peace.
Right.
And there was a lot of chaos. The kids had a lot of stuff to unpack. So that's when even learning even more just about grace and forgiveness and how that works. So we had to. I just was there for them, there for myself, and this time, like the Bible says, I captured my thoughts and wrote them
Mhm.
down in a book somewhere of what I would like to see in a partner. And so that's where my wife comes in. So it's probably about a year, almost a year and a half, that I was single, not dating, just working, living life with the kids. Um, I see this beautiful woman on Facebook that comes up as a friend suggestion. So, I send a friend request. A few months goes by, and we start chatting a little bit in DMs. Uh, and then she starts telling me that her and I don't want to say his name, like her and her ex's name. Um, they got divorced here a while back, but she kept mentioning his name, and in my head, I'm like, why do you think I know who this dude is? Why would you mention his name? And then I go back, I look at her last name, and just straight verbatim, I'm like, holy shit, you're that girl. So what I realized is I've raced motocross since I was in my mid 20s, and here in Kansas, central Kansas, I I was I guess I was a little bit quicker. I used to race like the A class, like the local pro class. Um, and her ex-husband rode dirt bikes, and he would come over and talk to me quite a bit.
Mm,
Um, and I didn't know this until she and I met, years later. So it's been 25 years between when I knew her husband or ex-husband and when we come together, when we met. But all I remember is I walked into a house party one time in my mid 20s, and I walk in and I see him and I see her. They're laying on the floor watching TV, and she turns around and looks at me just because I'm walking in the door. And I was like, "Oh my god, she's just gorgeous." And I see him, I'm like, "What the heck?" So, I never even knew her name.
He'd outkicked his coverage, huh?
Yeah, that's an understatement. So I never even knew her name. I knew him casually, just as an acquaintance, but he was kind of the one of the gossip kind of guys. So he liked to keep up with Frank Sell because he knew Frank Sell. And what she told me is like whenever I would race and they were there, then he would drag her up there and they together would watch me race because he knew Frank Sell. And
Huh,
then all the guys in her office knew her. So many people around her, or her, all the guys in her office knew me. And so all the people around her. So like one of her coworkers, uh, he pretty much told her, it's like, you Frank Sell's asking you to go out. It's like, he told her, it's like, you're stupid if you don't do it. Well, he was one of the guys that I had met at Men's Encounter, is we rode
okay.
the bus together. Um, but it was just funny to look back and like, how God works because, the man I am today qualifies for that kind of woman. Um,
Right.
so when I saw who she was and where we were at this point in life, I knew we were getting married because I knew what God had done. He'd taken me through, this. People like to say there's defining moments in life. I don't like to say defining moments
Right.
because to me, that's an anchor that anchors me to that moment in life. And just like all of us know, you don't just pull oil out of the ground and put it in your gas tank. You don't just pull a diamond out of the ground, put it on your finger. Those things had to be refined. And anything that's been refined is more valuable. So
Mm,
become a more valuable person in God's kingdom. Um, so I looked at what had transpired, that I had gone, my ex was brought to me to help refine me. She had the opportunity to refine herself also. But there was things that were intentionally being done to undermine me and our marriage and my children and stuff. So, that's where that came in. But with my wife, it has been basically perfect. In 5 years, we've never been sideways. She respects me as a man, as a leader, as a husband, and I love her to death, just like, the love and respect book talks about.
amen. Right.
Um, so it's just been incredible when you kind of pause. I call it patience in the pause and just listen.
That's good. That's good. Well, good, man. That's a great story. And so from here, so you still have the kids,
Mhm.
correct? Are they old enough to be out of
Yeah,
the house yet?
yeah, just like kids, they're in, they're out. My daughter,
Oh,
she's very independent, like myself. So
okay.
she's out there. And my son, he moved back home maybe a year and a half ago or so, which I mean it's great. He pays rent and
Right.
we have the standards and the rules, so he's had the same job for going on 4 years now, doing really well. And my wife, she has two girls, 25 and 21. My
Okay.
daughter's 21, my son's 20. um, so we're pretty blessed with having good kids with a good head on their shoulders.
That's great. That's great. Well, congratulations. I'm glad, a lot of times God's got a jerk a knot in our tail. And I think that's what he's kind of done with you and, get you to a place to where you see that, in your own efforts, you can't do it. And I love what you were saying a while ago is about the crying, after the men's retreat, because I think that's where men typically fail more than anything is learning to be emotional, that we don't have
Mhm.
to take it all on our own.
Mhm.
that we don't have to, try to figure it all out, that we're, you know, completely stone-hearted, that we don't, and that a lot of times will affect our relationships, that affect the way that we have talks with our wives or conversations with our wives, and the way that we address our kids. If we're not there, not that emotional side of you, a lot of times they will feel like they can't talk with you. And I love that I love when God breaks the stone heart and builds a new flesh heart. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, he definitely has a way of personalizing his message to reach us in a way
Yeah,
that we will understand.
exactly. And that's the great thing about God. Like the overarching message is the same for everybody, but the way that it affects you is different for everybody. Some
Yeah.
are, knocked off their seat, and some are like, I've known this my whole life. And some are like, okay, I'm still trying to figure out, just keep leading me, Lord. So
Mhm.
God uses a lot of different things for that. One of the things that you were talking about, and you've mentioned quite a bit, and I just kind of want to, if you don't mind, I just kind of want to press on this a little bit. You kept talking about peace, and that you're looking, you have to have that peace, whether it's from your wife or your kids or anything like that. And God tells us that we will have that peace that surpasses all understanding in Him. Like, were
Mhm.
you looking for the wrong kind of peace? Have you found the right kind of peace? Like, what was that in your mind, and has it changed over time?
Well, that's kinda where the ego comes in because I was never looking for peace up until, I met Christ.
Mm,
I'm Frank Sell, I'll figure it out kind of guy. Um, but after that, uh, I got some peace that weekend, and then, like you're saying, take your by prayer and petition, take your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will
right.
calm your heart and mind. And I really, like you said, I realized that I didn't have to figure it all out.
Mm,
And through the leadership program, one things that I really pulled out of that was kind of like the 90-10 rule. And there's only 10% of things that I have to 100% be right and hold my ground, and the other 90% of stuff can just go water under the bridge.
right.
If there's a dangerous situation, finances, some different things, I I will not move. I will not budget. I have to stand my ground. But the rest of the stuff is not take it personally. Um,
Yeah.
and that come also through like love and respect, and the by forgiveness is like dumping hot coals on their head. And so one of the
Mm,
things that so I actually have I had started a podcast, and the chaotic marriage and all the different stuff kind of it drove me off track, which is the perfect Jezebel spirit thing to do.
right.
And so I still have a website and the podcast I think is still up there, but it's called Armored Up Man
Right.
because I've been going through all this stuff, and I was at an event where there was like Ryan Mickler and Sean Whalen, a few of the guys were there. I was like, these guys are just telling their story. And that's all they're doing. If your audience learns something from this, it's got nothing to do with me. They were needing the story to get their lesson. So I was like, what's my story? And I thought, well, it's Armored Up Man, because I felt like all these spiritual attacks, we need the armor of discernment. We need to
Right.
protect our hearts and that emotion, kind of understand our emotions, understand, so one of the things I realized through crying and so on is, instead of being ashamed about it, not meaning that I'm a wussy for crying or whatever, what that really means is that we care about something,
Right.
and that we care about an outcome, we care about others, whatever it is, you know, um, that's what crying is. It's releasing that emotion and feeling it. I'm not a touchy-feely emotional kind of guy, but at the same time, I have a lot of conversations with dudes that cry around me just because of the openness. And so the Armored Up Man was truth, honor, and legacy. Like, what is the truth? And so, Christ is the truth. The Bible is the truth. So how do I honor that truth? that's by living it over time, and by
Right.
living it, that's going to create my legacy. And so it's just a process of going through there and realizing that I'm not as good as I think I am, but I'm better than I know I can be, um, and not taking things personally, and looking at life and especially relationships through a grace and forgiveness mindset, and kind of discerning through the armor when these situations come to me. Okay, I can understand your point. What's my involvement in this process? What's my involvement in the situation? And kind of separating, discerning all the different parts of a situation, and say, well, that's a you problem. This is a me problem. And then going and finding an answer for it, either through a book or through a sermon or through a mentor, whatever it is. The answer's out there. You just have to be willing to seek it.
Right. That's good. That's good. So let's hop into your business. I think you've got quite a few, or have had quite a few. Why don't you tell the audience, kind of what your plan, purpose, mission is now, that you have some of these things going, and how does that, one, uh, help your family, and two, maybe some of the men that you're trying to reach, out there as well, or I should say other people, not just men.
Yeah. Um, so I've been self-employed since 2003, and that's kind of the story that a lot of people really love, is how I did that. So like yourself and me, we grew up back in the 1900s. Our
Yeah.
parents, what they tell us: get an education or get a trade. You get a job that has a pension. For you kids out there, that's like a retirement package. So
Which
that
they
was,
don't have much anymore.
yeah, right. Um, so that was the path that I followed. I knew education wasn't the traditional education wasn't for me. I couldn't hardly stand high school, so I learned how to weld. I picked up a trade, and the last job that I've had, I started in 1994, Valentine's Day, 1994.
Mm.
I started working at JI Case, and I was employee 5331. Haven't had that job, I don't know, 23 years now. But I started that job. I was 18 years old, and I was a welder. I was making decent money, and the cream on the top was they had a 30-year retirement program,
Mm.
the dream. So I could retire when I'm 48 years old with a full pension, all the stuff, all the benefits that
Right.
we told was the golden goose growing up. Um, so it was a few years after I started this job, they got bought out by Fiat New Holland. And typically, when a company gets bought out, they do a restructure. They restructure benefits.
Yeah.
So they changed it to where no matter what, you had to work until you were 55. And so I looked around, and I was like, there's not any healthy old welders here. Um, and on top of that, I don't want to work until I'm 50 and have them change the deal on me again.
Mhm.
So here in central Kansas, it storms a lot in the summertime and so on. So I knew some guys that did paintless dent repair, fixed hail damage on cars, and they'd asked me about working with them before, and I kind of passed them up because I'm mid-20s in the 90s or early 2000s. I was making $20 an hour, had 4 weeks paid vacation, all the stuff. Um, but when I was ready, I finally approached them and said, "Hey, would you guys be willing to train somebody again? Work with you guys?" Well, he kind of laughed at me, and he's like, "Well, we can't really train you, but if you figure it out, then we can put you to work." He said, "Here's a website or a phone number. I can't remember what it was. Call these guys." And I bought a $100 VHS tape on how to fix hail damage on cars, how to do paintless dent repair.
That's great.
Uh, and so I did that. I bought some used tools, and I spent just 2 or 3 nights a week. I would just practice. I'd watch the video at home, and I'd go in town to my dad's shop. He had a truck repair shop, and work on stuff at the shop. And in March of 2003, there was a huge hailstorm in Dallas. Um, I called this guy. They were asking for volunteers for layoffs because things were slow at work. I called this guy and said, "Hey, could you use some help in Dallas?" And at the time, he said yes. And so my daughter was on the way. Um, I volunteered for a layoff, drove 6 hours to Dallas, and I get there, and I get the well, so and so's brother took the spot, so we don't have anything for you.
Oh
So
no.
here, I'd volunteered for a layoff. I had a kid on the way, drive 6 hours. Um, and so, hey, that's no problem. I didn't understand this was part of the sales process also at the time, but I said, well, that's okay. I get it. Who else do you know? I didn't understand that was a sales technique of if you were, rejection or something.
Right,
Oh,
exactly.
well, who else do you know? So he hooked me up with a guy that could use my help. I started helping him, and I'm enthusiastic about my training that I've been doing. And hey, I'm pretty good at this. And I was telling the guys like, hey, I've been learning how to do this. And so they say, yeah, why don't you, sure, jump in here and try a few dents. So I did that, fixed a few dents, and dude looked at me. He's like, why aren't you doing this full time instead of, because at the time I was taking the cars apart and putting them back together.
Right.
And instead of pushing the dents out, and this other guy's like, dude, you're better than I am when I started doing dents. Said, why aren't you doing them? Well, because my buddy said I wasn't any good. I couldn't be any good. Nobody trained me. And so I called my buddy up and said, hey man, your buddy says I'm pretty good at this. Can I come fix dents for you guys and take cars
Right.
apart for you? And he just laughed at me and said, no, it'd be too much like training you. Like, okay. Well, I drove home the next week and started my own business.
Wow.
Um, and so that's where, like in my coffee brand, that's where Beat the Street So Hard, they send you a bill for the potholes. That's where that comes from, because it was, 2003. We didn't have the internet like we do today. We had the
Right.
yellow pages. You had to go out and see people. Um, so that was the beginning of my first business. I had no clue what I was doing. Only thing I knew was that I'm Frank Sell and I don't quit.
Awesome. That is awesome. So how long do you still have that company?
That's still my main income source, is the hail damage business.
No
It's hard.
kidding.
Yeah, it's a hard one to walk away from. And along the way, a lot like your podcast in 2017. I started Home of the Hustle, a Facebook page, because I had some Facebook friends that we were like minded, and we started off as another podcast. But that's also like an example of audit your circle and know who your circle is, because there were just habits and situations in that didn't sit well with me, and I wouldn't stand for it, and I would voice my opinion. Basically, I would kind of call a brother out like we're supposed to,
Right.
and so I was more or less kicked out of the group for that. And the following Monday, I started Home of the Hustle Facebook page, and so what that was is Home of the Hustle was a way for me, and my friends to do more or less like a podcast. It was a Facebook Live page where we
Right.
do Facebook Lives 4 or 5 days a week. We'd have a different host every night, but essentially there was a few things like I wanted to start an online business, an online brand. I didn't know how to, so I would interview people that knew how to, and so that would build a networking connections, that would build an audience, and then, before we know it, we had quite a few followers, but we didn't have anything really to sell.
Right.
So I just really enjoy sharing the stories, because I feel there's a few things to it. Like I read a really good book that it's called Dollars Want Me.
Mm,
And it talks about how dollars want us, but they want to be used. They want to be enjoyed. They want to be multiplied. Dollars have a use and a value, um, and they can be used any number of ways, good, bad, whatever. But we have, our choice of what to do with those.
right.
But what that also meant to me in that book is that it said, "God is my supply, and my supply is abundant." And it's not so much prosperity gospel or teaching. What I took out of that is that everything's already provided. God
Mhm.
rested on the sixth day because he made everything except the version of you and me that aligns and elevates to what we say we want in life.
Mhm.
So that's on us to grow and elevate. So
Mm.
through this page, we grew an audience of people that knew us, they like us, they trust us. We didn't have any products to sell, but we just did it for the networking opportunity and the growth. We started going to a bunch of different like entrepreneur events and so on, meeting
Right.
people that were successful in the areas that we wanted to grow into. So that's one of the number one things to look for if you're looking to grow, looking for a mentor. Do they have fruit on the tree in the areas that you want to grow? Do they have fruit on the tree of God's kingdom? I don't want to, if somebody's mega wealthy or mega successful, but they had to do it in a dirty fashion. I don't want to, I don't want to emulate that life. So, um,
Hmm.
just do a fruit check. And so one of the guys that I'd met through going to these different events and so on, Norm, he's a very successful Amazon and Walmart.com seller. So he asked me to come on his podcast one day because he loves that $100 videotape story. And here this
That's
guy is.
great.
He sells eight figures, like 10 plus $1 million a year of stuff online, and he wants to hear my $100 videotape story when I'm living in the basement of a two-bedroom house and sleeping on on a mattress on the floor. He loves that story because there's power behind it. What I realize is, I'm not selling coffee, I'm not selling products, I'm selling permission and inspiration to, as our coffees, as get shit done, to go out there and be great and take action on an idea, um, and be bold. And
Right.
so right before I went on his podcast, I had ordered some coffee because I see up all the time. I see all the time to show up, find friends that want to do cool stuff, and get it done. And so part of that was I was showing up to an event called Million Cups. They have them all across the country every Wednesday. And I met some guys that have a coffee business. They have they call it a co-packer. So they can coffee for themselves, they can it for other people. And they were selling coffee beans at the time locally, and they were kind of a startup. And at the time, my first brand was a beard oil. I had a beard oil. I totally forgot about that. Um, I had an essential beard oil brand. So basically, it's like a facial diffuser. It has the whole brand was modeled around using the therapeutic effect of essential oils instead of all the fake machismo manhood stuff of a
Right.
skinny pants and a flannel shirt and a big beard and tobacco barrel or whiskey that, all these different aromas that people kind of
Right.
assume are macho. Well, these were beard oils that would help you relax and go to sleep. If you can put them like a diffuser, like a
Mm.
lavender and sage, stuff like that. Well, if it's mixed into the beard oil, it's right here on your face. I'd have guys that would message me and say, "Man, I hold my infant next to my beard with that oil. They go
Yeah.
to
Look
sleep
at
and
that.
relax."
That's great.
Yeah, it was amazing.
That's great. I can't grow a beard long enough to use any oil.
Not with that attitude.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, I just can't. It won't grow far enough.
Not with that attitude.
No, I gotta get. Well, it's falling off my head and onto my shoulders. So
Yeah,
there you go.
maybe that's what it is. I have a lot more hair growing power. It just moved locations.
Just moved location. That's good. Yeah,
Yeah. So I,
that's
I met
great.
these guys, and they bought beard oil from me. We had a beard oil that was called, the GSD, Get It Done, because they had peppermint stuff to kind of help wake you up, help you focus. So they bought beard oil from me, and I bought coffee beans for myself, and I had some stickers made to give away with the GSD beard oil,
Right.
and I had a bag of coffee beans laying on my desk, and I had some stickers. If you're listening on the podcast, you can see this on the video, but it's a GSD sticker that had the Baby Beard Club on there, not the coffee company.
Okay.
And so I thought it'd be funny to just put a sticker on the bag of coffee and post it on
Right.
Facebook. So because I had this home of the hustle entrepreneur audience, and they see this picture of GSD coffee, they were like, "Dude, are you doing that? Are you selling GSD coffee? How do I buy it?" I had 4 bags sitting there, and I sold it to my friends. I put a sticker on it and sold it to them. And called my buddies and said, "Hey, can I sell your coffee as GSD?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, that's what we do. It's called private label or a white label.
Right. Exactly.
They make it, and then I brand it as my own and sell it." So I started selling some coffee beans and coffee grinds, and then eventually, I asked them, "So, well, how do we make a canned coffee?" Because that's what their main business is canned
Right.
coffee. Um, and so they told me different ways to get started. In September of uh, 2020, we had our first pallet of GSD canned coffee that was produced. That was like almost 3,000 cans. I had no idea what I'm doing, but
Right.
I'm gonna figure it out on the way. And so within 5 weeks, sold 3,000 cans of coffee. No ads,
Wow.
just hype and hustle, social media and going out and selling it in person, stuff like that. Uh, so that taught me, that validated the idea. So that's, one of the things that maybe like the Jezebel spirit or just the ego wants to protect you and keep you from looking stupid. But really, people think they have to have a big business plan. They have to be educated, have to have the approval of somebody, but really the only validation that you need is somebody willing to hand you money for your product or idea, and then you can
Right.
adjust and grow from there.
Right. That's good. That's really good. So, excuse me, how long have you had the coffee company now?
So 2020 is when we started
It
the
was
coffee
okay,
brand.
2020. Okay. So you basically started after you bought your first pallet of coffees. Was that the minimum order was a pallet?
No, the minimum order is at that time it was 500 gallons, which would have been about 3.5 pallets. But since I was private labeling this product, they were doing a production run for themselves, and they called me and said, "Hey, do you want to do a pallet for yourself of GSD coffee? We're going to run this. It's called Jet Puff because
Right.
it's made to model a Jet Puff marshmallow, the flavor.
Oh,
So
fun.
we're going to do a run of this, 1,000 gallons. We'll make a pallet for you, and we'll put your label on it if you want to." And said, it's like, well, why not? I'll try that. So I did that, and I said I blew out a whole pallet of it, and I wound up outselling them to where they basically gave me the formula. If you're private, there's one way to get started, and that's proprietary formula. So that
Right.
means I own the formula, nobody else can make it. Well, that's
Right.
like a $20,000 to $30,000 object
Investment.
right there
Yeah, exactly.
before you ever produce a can of coffee. So we got started that way. And it's pretty neat because I'm sitting here in my office, I'm looking at the different revisions of the cans, but one thing from the beginning, every can of coffee, and again, you can see this on the video. You can't see it real good, but every can has Galatians 5:1 on it.
Oh, sweet. That's
So
nice.
that's where I say it. I'm not selling coffee. I'm selling permission and inspiration, because on the can it says "Do it scared until you do it skilled." That came from a conversation I had with a friend of mine. He was talking about starting another business and told me he was scared, and I related it to motocross in my
Mm,
mind. I've done 100-foot triple jumps, even just recently. 50, and like from 45 to 50, I've raced motocross and jumped big stuff, and done some pretty dangerous stuff. And just instantly, I just tell them, well, just do it scared until you can do it skilled, because you know, riding a dirt bike, doing 100-foot jump, I don't have a real clear idea. I have a best guess what it's going to take to
right.
do that. And yeah, I'm scared the first time or two, but the 100th time, you know what happens, Jody? The
You
100th time I do a 100-foot triple jump, I relax my grip and I look around and I breathe,
yeah.
because I know it so well, I don't even know what I know.
Muscle memory kicks in. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
That that
that's kinda where that come from. Um, so I realized the coffee is a commodity. It's a way for me to get a message out, and like our dry coffee, I try to wrap inspiration, and I try to wrap things around it to make people think. That's something that
right.
I'll come back to the thinking part. So like this, our ground coffee and our K cups, they're called the extra mile espresso. And the reason why I call it the extra mile espresso, because in my feeling, there is no extra mile.
Mm,
It's the quote on this bag is extra mile espresso. The only problem with the extra mile is thinking that it's extra.
right.
Majority of the time when people say, "Oh, we go the extra mile," that's just a manipulation. That's just a marketing tactic.
Right.
If you just give your best every time, there is no extra mile. It's
Right.
all the way.
You're
Give it all.
you're already there. Yeah, exactly. That's
Right.
good.
Why would I hold something back just so I can tell you I'm trying to sell you the
Right.
extra mile?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and so the
Yeah.
thinking part, that's something on my come to Jesus moment that
Mhm.
weekend, is something that I ask myself all the time in situations, and whether it was arguments or whatever the situation was, whose thinking am I thinking?
Mm,
Because I saw the patterns. Our growth is in the patterns. God loves us so much. He provides people, he provides situations, opportunities for us to grow and refine ourselves.
right.
And so I look back, I'm Frank Sell the fourth. Bible says, sins of the Father, sins of the Son. All these things, and the modern day thing is epigenetics and these
Right.
different things, energies passed down. So when I looked at the situations, whether it was the marriage or finances or business or whatever, is this how I really think? Is this how I really feel? Or is this what I learned from my parents or from people around
Mm,
me?
right.
And psychology will say that by time we're 7 years old, we've developed all of our emotional habits and patterns. And most of us continue to repeat those until death. We never take
Mm,
ownership of our life and intentionally look for blind spots and look to fill those blind spots and grow.
that's good. That's really good. So where are you like so with the dent removal and the coffee company, are those you said the dent removal you just really can't get rid of that just because it's the cash cow, so to speak, or you probably got that kind of ingrained, kind of like muscle memory, and it's pretty easy to do now. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and I work with what I call first ring customers. You've heard
okay.
of 5 star and this and that.
Right.
My first ring customers, I'll pick the phone up on the first ring.
Right, exactly.
I've been doing it long enough that I like them, they like me. I know they pay well. It's just like you said, it's easier money because we've had such a long relationship. Of most of the shops that I work with now, I've worked with them. I do what's called subcontracting. So your local body shops don't do what I do in house. Most of them hire guys like me when there's a storm to
Right.
come in and fix the damage because we're experts. That's all we do. Um, and so there's about 10 shops within 80 miles of home that I've done the repairs, but I've done them for 20 years. So they're family. They're
Right.
not, I just can't walk away from that.
Heck
And the
no.
coffee business doesn't require all my time. Um, it's still growing and it's going to take a lot to get it to where it provides an income, provides the cash flow to even begin think about letting go or doing something different
Right, exactly. Yeah,
with my life.
exactly. So with the home of the hustle, is that kind of your overarching mindset, or is that still active, or is that kind of the funnel that you take the dent removal and the coffee company through? Is that part of the package, so to speak, that you have?
Yeah, I'm
Is it
not quite
just
sure.
is it just kind of I mean, is it like a oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Is it a business itself or just a
Yeah,
mindset?
no, it's a business.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess it was. So most people, like when I started, they people would tell me that they were looking for the GSD coffee, but they couldn't find it online. It's like, oh, that's because it's homeofthehustle.com.
Right.
So basically, there's almost a GSD coffee by Home of the Hustle. So they're
Right.
all almost two separate things. Home of the Hustle is just a that's just always been a way for me to express myself and be able to share my stories and get that out of there. And it already had an audience, so that's just kind of where everything landed.
Got it.
Um, because I got a really good story about sharing the stories and my thoughts on that. It's kind of a parable, if you would say. So I feel that it's actually selfish to not do like what we're doing and figure your story out, but then to not share it is 100% selfish to me. And the example I like to give to people is, there's one time, they say you shouldn't use space heaters and shouldn't use space heaters overnight and so on.
Right.
And so there was this example. I had a space heater going in my bedroom at one time. And so over here, the space heater's on my left. And basically on that side of the room was the end of the circuit, the plugins over there. And over on the right side of the bed, there was a plug-in that caught on fire. The heater was plugged in on the left, two separate outlets, but the energy and electricity flowed through that other outlet to get to the heater.
Right.
The heater was asking for the energy, for the flow, for the information, but it couldn't get it from that other electrical outlet because over time, those outlets, the wires will expand and contract because there's so much energy flowing through them, it become loose. There was a loose connection. And so even though that heater was asking for all the energy, it caused a fire in
Mm,
that outlet where the loose connection was. That loose connection was waiting for my story to tighten it up. And so that's kind of the way I look at sharing our stories. It's we're meant to overcome things and then share how we did that with the next person.
Right. That's good. That's really good. Yeah, I was stalking your website today and all that. So here's a question that you probably are asked, or maybe you're not asked, but as a
Uh-huh.
pastor,
Yeah.
okay. So
Hmm.
from a
I love this one.
theological pastoral standpoint, how did you come up with the name? Like, and how do you for me, one of the things that God took away from me in 2003 when I gave my life to Him, because I was in the
Mhm.
military, I was in sales. I've owned my own companies too since 2000 or 1998, and you know, one thing that you always do is you just cuss. Just
Yeah.
kind of a habit, and it's something that I did. But the first thing that God took away from me is the cussing. Like boom, it was almost automatically gone. I heard my little girl, 2 years old, say the f bomb. Drop the f
Oh
bomb.
yeah.
It wasn't even an F, because she couldn't say her F's, but it was an S.
Uh-huh.
But I could tell what she was saying just because she
Yeah.
loved it. And then I gave my life to the Lord. So the name of the coffee, and I'm not going to say it, but
Yeah.
it's get stuff done.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And how do you like? How did the name come up? Number one, and then how are you reconciling that? Just keeping it going.
Well, there's a few things in there.
Okay.
So, number one, when people ask me about it, I simply say, well, normally it's the people sit in the front row.
Well, I do because I preach. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also,
Mm,
in all transparency, that's my battle to, or my judgment, when I get
right.
there to be. But also, so and also like it's just there's a lot of things there.
Right.
So I understand that's my obligation to, when I get to the gates, to answer for that. Um, but also at the same time, like you said, talking about Saul and Paul,
Hmm.
I have no idea how God's going to use me. And
Right.
so there are people that will be attracted to me that won't be attracted to you because of those standards,
Right.
but they may still see the light in me.
Right. Well, I don't have
That's
standards. I'm just saying, like,
yeah.
there's a certain idea that God has for us when we're talking about holiness and righteousness. And then
Mhm.
I own a construction company, and trust me, I've hit my thumb a few times, so
Yeah.
I get it, and I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means. I was just asking, how
Yeah.
has that been, like for me, it's one of those convictions that kicked in, pretty
Yeah.
quickly,
Yeah.
so I think I think it's a cool name, I think it's catchy, and I think it's, all of those things, but like I can't even say it, I'd get kicked out of my church.
Yeah. Right.
Hey, I just
If
drank
you
some.
can think it,
I'd love
if
to
you can
have
think it,
some, but I can't carry a can around at church.
right. But we all know if you can think it,
Yeah, exactly.
it's
Yeah,
there.
exactly. I
There's
get
levels to it.
I get you, man. You're exactly right. It is a judgmental world for sure.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
That's great. I
So
wanted to ask you that question just out of poops and grins, just to
yeah.
kind of get it. I totally get it. I think it's fun, and yeah, I do believe we take a lot of things out of too serious sometimes, and
Yeah.
you know,
Well, it's like, I think Paul was a pretty rowdy character from what I understand, and
yeah,
God
yeah,
used him for a pretty big story, and
yeah,
Saul, same thing. So that's, I think I understand what people where they're coming from, and I usually approach them with just usually the people in the front row that say it. They laugh and,
yeah.
oh yeah, what's it taste like? Let me try some. How much does it cost?
Right, exactly.
That's where the conversation usually goes. But same time, like I said, there's I understand. I have it. I have an understanding. Understand means I know it all. I have an understanding, where God's positioned me to reach, a certain amount of people. And at the end of the day, that is my ministry. That'll draw people to me that do not expect those conversations from me and what Christ has done for me.
Right,
And at the end of the day, they it maybe it sparks something, maybe it doesn't, but I try not to think I know how God's going to use me, but I know where I'm at. I know where my results are.
Right.
And so I just try to show up and be there. And that means show up without a hidden intention, really knowing who you are and where all your gifts come from.
Right, exactly. No, that's good. That's a good answer. I appreciate it. I just, like I said, I just wanted to ask you and see where you were with that, and see if it has been reconciled, and it has been. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not going to hell for that. I'm not saying you do, and you probably won't even have to answer for it. It's one of those things that words change over time, meanings change over time, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that'll be between I'm good with it. I just wanted to ask that question because it's hard for me to even say, just because I've like that was one thing that God just took away from me just
Yeah.
instantly.
Well, and
uh,
I'll turn it around on them sometimes too and say, okay, well, if you're a really good Christian, you know, Christ is supposed to be our best friend. What's his last name? Majority of people don't even think about it. They don't
right,
research it, so
right, that's
so
good.
everything that I've looked at is it's either Bar Yosef or of Nazareth
Right,
because
right.
didn't really do last names
Yeah,
back then. Bar Yosef, son of Joseph.
yeah, yeah. It's the son of Joseph usually. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That Jesus, son of Joseph, or Joshua, son of Joseph.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
So
That's
I
good.
get people are they're most of the time it's from a good intention, coming from a good place.
Right.
Um, you know, and then like I said, it's just funny how once we break that ice, have a conversation, and oh yeah, I've had your coffee before. I loved it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm not judging you by any means at all. Don't take it
Yeah.
that way.
Oh no, I'm not totally not.
I
Yeah.
just I had to ask the question.
Yeah.
'Cause it like I started reading your story and I started looking up there, everything, because I'm pretty protective of, we talk about some raw stuff on here. Don't
Mhm.
some good stuff, but I'm also very protective of, who we bring on. And I kept looking at that and I was like, he's got to have a good story. I got to hear the story. It's like
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all do. Most of us just don't understand our stories or understand the
right.
purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So the coffee company's growing. The
Yeah.
dent removal company's growing.
Mhm.
Are you in a place now where you're trying to, help men in ways, or people, I should say, in ways to maybe help grow their companies, or are you just trying to share your story? Are you coaching at all whatsoever, discipling anything through finances? You talked about earlier the kind of multi-level marketing. It's usually faith, family, fitness, finance, and focus is,
Mhm.
typically what that is. Are you doing anything like that at all?
Um, yes. Yes, I am. It's not as focused and intentional, but at the same time it is because
Mm.
I share a lot of our life through social media, through
Right.
Facebook, just our day-to-day life, but then also, I'm building communities. So building a community of people through our coffee that we get to share a message with and share inspiration and stories. Um,
Right.
Business coaching. I had a friend of mine that called me this morning and coached him through some marriage stuff and through some business stuff. There's not like intentional programs to do
Right.
that. Um, but it really is, to me, it's about building the communities. We started building early this year, built an RC car racetrack. That's kind of a big
Yeah, that's
nerdy
fun.
hobby, but I've done that since I was a kid and started a racetrack. Well, now just this last Saturday, we had 43 people out here at the house racing cars. That we get to influence them by being around us and see how we operate and how we handle situations.
Right.
And then also being present in conversations, because I feel like there's a thing about conversations, and it's kind of like you see the video games, the non-playable characters when they're just standing there and they're kind of wiggling, they're
Right.
not being used, not playing. Well, I realized, in life, there's just a big difference between participation and observation, and I noticed that
Mm.
in conversations sometimes that people just want to they don't want to observe. They just want to participate. They just want to talk. They don't want to go anything other more than surface level. But by being present, understand that if this is something I'm supposed to observe, or if I'm supposed to participate in this conversation, try to connect with this person on some level. It's like this morning, conversation, it was pretty deep about some stuff. So it's just wherever I am, I just try to show up and be that light that people are looking for.
Right. That's great, man. That's really good. And so you said you're still writing too.
Mhm.
Um, my 14-year-old son, man, he wants to get into it so bad. And I just bought him oh gosh, what do you call it? Remember the lawnmower type motorcycles, the big fat wheel, fat
Oh, yeah.
boys, the
Mhm.
big fat.
Yep.
I just got him one of those. It's got the governor on it. It'll only do 25, 30 miles an hour. And
That's fast
he,
enough.
yeah, exactly. He's like trying to YouTube to figure out how you can take the governor off of.
That's what we do. We're a man.
I know it exactly. So,
Last year, my son and I come over to Archview. They're in St. Louis in the road,
okay.
the
Yeah,
track over there.
you probably drove right past. Well, you came in 70, I would imagine. I live on 44, down by Six Flags. So,
Okay.
um,
Yeah, we were down in Fenton, at First
okay.
Form down there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's fine. I'm in Eureka actually, just
Okay.
outside of, it's 5 minutes, 7 minutes from Fenton. So you're right
Okay.
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. I was out in Hutchinson. Gosh, I owned a company. We did industrial paint booths, and probably the
Okay.
largest deal I ever did out there was for an aerospace company out of Germany that was building a new facility. That's probably 2009, right, either right before the crash or after the crash in '09.
Mhm.
It was a big old job that we did out there. I used to do paint booths for planes, trains, and automobiles, basically,
Okay.
and we installed them all over the world. So
Nice.
glad I don't anymore. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that being on the road is a whole 'nother animal.
Yeah, well, having employees is a whole nother animal, especially back in those. I mean, it was like babysitting, trying to get guys to go out to, that couldn't get a job at McDonald's, but hiring them because they could put a paint booth together and they
Right.
get out on the road thinking it's a party, and
Oh,
half
yeah.
half the week they're late to the job or not even showing up because they're drunk and hungover. So
Yeah. Yeah, just no structure at all.
at all, had a couple guys use our credit cards to strip clubs, and so
Yeah.
it was crazy. So yeah, Hutchison's out there. So I spent some time at Fort Riley, Kansas. That's where I did boot camp. Yeah,
Okay.
excuse me.
Nice.
That's where I did my AIT, and duty station was in Fort Riley, Kansas. So,
Yeah, do you know any Pelkeys?
uh-uh,
No? No,
no,
Chad Pelkey is a friend of mine. I'm sure I know
no.
others from up
I was
there.
in there at 1990 is when I
90?
went. Yeah.
Okay. My grandparents had a Kirby vacuum shop in Junction City back then.
Oh, no kidding. I probably have a Kirby, had a Kirby back then. So
Yeah.
those
Yep.
things were 500 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
Big old things, big old silver head on them.
Yeah. Yeah, they're tanks, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's funny. That's good. So, what do you got planned in the pipe? I mean, is there anything coming up that our audience would need to know? I mean, like with the coffee company, or is there anything that you got big on the horizon? With anything new?
I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
So here a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I'm driving home, and the thing about a startup or a brand like this is, on one perspective, it's successful because we're selling product. But on the other hand, so the first, I gave myself 5 years to get the brand going,
Mhm.
because I knew with the hail damage business, it took me 3 years to even really understand what I was doing,
Right.
you know, and then from there, I actually kind of start making money. So I kind of gave myself the same roadmap for this. And the first 3, 4 years, we'd go race motocross all over the Midwest. We would vend and sell the coffee in person.
Mhm.
That's another thing. I'm meeting people in person all the time, and I'm sharing my story. I'm sharing the gospel in person at an expo with people. Like I said, I've literally had people cry in front of me just because when I tell them the story, they're just like, "Oh my God, I've been searching for this, been praying for this." So I know that's what just showing up does,
Right.
and being
That's
intentional.
good.
Yeah. Um, so I did that for about 3 or 4 years because I knew I needed to build a story. I need to understand what I'm doing. Um, I had a lot of people that wanted to invest early, but I knew that I just didn't know enough to know what to do with the money or how to grow it, and how to honor their respect their money too. And so did that to build the story and build the brand and get it out there. And then the last couple of years, we've been focused more on doing paid ads, trying to grow the brand through make it a real business to where it can
Right.
work without us. So up to that point now, it's it's super expensive. Just the marketing budget, running ads, running a light staff to help keep up with stuff. Um, it's super draining, but at the same time, it's I know it's also part of my purpose because it's attached to my story. So the
Right.
other day, I was just driving home and I was just frustrated. I was tired. It was hot. Been working my butt off. Work out in the heat. Work with my hands, and then I get home and I have to try and look at ads, try to package up orders, all this different stuff. And I'm just driving home. I was like, man, it's like God, man, I'm burnt out. I need some help. I just don't know what to do next. So we don't really have any distribution other than through e-commerce selling online.
Right.
And I think that was a Thursday or Friday where I had that conversation, and then I think that Monday I get an email from a guy that's he's basically a broker with a lot of connections to distributors. He's worked with some pretty big brands, like Sobe back in the '90s,
Right.
stuff
Yeah.
like that. So he knows what he's doing. So there was an investment there to get started, but so we invested, and he's taken the product to a bunch of different companies, stores, and so on. And so we're kind of waiting to hear back from people and just see what the next steps are, from there. So it's just patience in the pause. Like I said,
Right.
I know there's the next step. I know there's 1,000 steps, but there's one best step, and the next step. And so I'm kind of having some patience right now. We're still heavy on the marketing and stuff, so it's not profitable by any means, but eventually we learn the things that we need to learn.
Right.
Um, it'll be a very big business. I call it a multi-million dollar brand and a multi-dollar business at the moment.
Yes. Well, you're in a space that is pretty inundated with a lot of people out there. So,
Yeah, yeah,
just to get your product in front of people, you're doing the smart thing because you're taking it with you wherever you go and just kind of building that brand loyalty, just,
mhm,
whether it's through racing or anything else. And so that'll help out quite a bit because that's more of a grassroots,
yeah,
marketing campaign, which, man, always helps build everything else. And then, social media gives you the ability to mass market, but it doesn't always bring in loyal customers. Um,
right,
and
yep,
that's the hard part is doing that. I've been doing social media, gosh, forever. And talking about earlier, 2003, there wasn't a whole lot of internet out there, and I started my paint booth company, an industrial air compressor company, in 2005. And back then, websites had just really kind of come out as the marketing avenue. And so we started putting all these backlinks into getting, our website to the first page because that's where everybody went, after
uh-huh,
they figured out what the internet was. And we were number one for paint booths, spray booths, car booths, every search engine name that you could, because we had backlinked to probably 10,000, 15,000 websites.
yeah,
And then 2013, Google changed the way that they were doing their backlinks, and they went to social media. That's where their algorithm changed from backlinks to social media. And I wasn't doing any social media whatsoever. And they
right,
had what was called the Penguin update. And man, we went to like page 12, on the search engine bar. And it was
yeah,
like, oh, crap, what do we do now? So
yeah,
it's always a fight, just trying to figure out what that market is for you.
yeah.
So,
It's always evolving to something.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. There for the longest time, it's been TikTok, and then it's, Facebook is kicking back in again, and it's just kind of, yeah, up and down. So,
Yeah.
Well, man, I tell you what, I appreciate your story. I appreciate your honesty, and just the legacy that you're trying to leave now. And man, we'll be praying for you as the future grows, and hopefully the coffee company kicks in and becomes profitable for you. And I pray that works for you as well, and that you continue to just reach people, for the sake of the
Mhm.
gospel, and all the avenues that you're in. And you got an awesome story. You need to keep telling it for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I don't take it lightly. I know all the pain that I cause for myself and
Mm,
for others around me, um, and just to honor that, just try to show up the best I can.
exactly. Well, wisdom comes in one of two ways. You either learn the mistakes yourself or from somebody else who's made them. And it's always easier if you'll just listen to somebody else who's been there, and it's,
Whatever.
yeah, exactly. I know. The older I get, man, it's like, man, if I'd have just listened, back then, things would have been a lot different. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's awesome. Well, brother, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the opportunity just to get to know you, and we'll be praying for you. And anything else you want to tell our audience before we leave?
yeah. You know what? You can find us anywhere. Just Frank Sell, SELL, and then at homeofthehustle.com/podcast. We have a little 5-step process that basically I learned this in network marketing, but I didn't realize that this is how I grew my first business, the Hell Damage.
Right,
Um, number one, you got to figure out what you want. And then number two, figure out who you need to go talk to, like the Yellow Pages back in the day.
right.
Um, and then go see them, and then adjust and do it again.
Amen. Amen, brother. Well, that's great. That is great. Well, good luck out there, and we'll stay in contact and just kind of see how things go over the years, and maybe talk to you again as things kind of perk up with you. And anytime you want to chat, man, we're there.
Absolutely, I know who to call next time I'm in the St. Louis area.
Heck yeah, man. Heck yeah. I would love to have you. Well, brother,
Right on.
thank you so much. And folks, make sure that you share this podcast with everyone on your social media. We'd love for you to help us reach more and more people for the sake of the gospel. Frank, brother, have a great time, and God bless you, brother.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it. All right.
You've been listening to the Man Up God's Way podcast. Visit us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and our website at manupgodsway.org.